treating something as a subject versus an object, to me, goes to the very heart of the practice of photography. And it's a subtle distinction, and the reason it matters is because how we treat our subject appears in the photograph. And the viewer will have that experience through our eyes. And so here's how I see that. Is normally in a relationship, but like between two people, one self comes forward and the other self comes forward, and those two selves meet. And in between, there's a third thing, which is the relationship. And between two people, the idea is that neither self wants to be too strong to impose itself on the other one. And to the extent either one is too strong or too judgmental or too strong in any way, then the other one gets crushed and can't express itself. And photographing something is kind of the same thing, where if our self comes forward and imposes a set of judgments or rules or ideas or stories on our subject, then two things happen. First of all, that set of rules and judgments and stories determines our attitude toward the subject, and that determines how we photograph it. So it's going to determine all of our behaviors that lead up to the clicking of the shutter. And it's also going to determine how we frame, how we see it, and all of that stuff adds up to convey, in the language of photography, how our relationship was with that thing. And so what I try to do is to remove myself from that entire process, to back away so that the subject can come forward as much as possible and fully express itself, its own individual kind of beingness. Most photographs, and especially you can see it in kind of sensational photojournalism, they are looking at that thing as something to take for themselves because they're doing their job and they need to make their salary and get their project done, and their role is to take that thing as fast as possible and move on to whatever's the next thing. And I remember soon after Hurricane Katrina, I was seeing all of those kind of photographs, and it made me sick that there's this profound tragedy that was happening in our country, and that's the way it was being treated photographically. And that was the primary reason that I packed up my gear and went down and spent 2 months doing my Katrina project. Is like, it deserved to be seen. There was like this incredibly powerful, tragic story that was happening down there, and nobody was telling it with reverence. Any subject, anything that we photograph, it could be a pebble on a beach, can be seen as a subject and thought of as a subject and treated as a subject. And as a photographer, it feels important to me to make a practice, like to develop a practice of remembering that I tend to have all of these judgments about stuff and labels. I want to label things. Standing in the forest, there's no human in sight. There's nothing human about any of those trees, and we label them as with our words. And my desire is to see those things, if it's possible to do, as much as we can, is to see that thing on its terms. And as we withdraw the projection, then there's some energy that comes forward. And that not only informs the entire process, but there's an intangible aspect about it as well. You call it a spiritual thing, or I don't know what it is. But that thing comes forward in a way that carries a kind of extra vividness. Edward Weston called it seeing the thing itself. And his relationship with his subject was mystical. And it's clearly there. It's clearly visible in all of his work. And that's something to me that all photographers can aspire to.